August 1, 1943, about 700 Benghazi, Libya. The desert floor vibrates. It is a sensation felt in the teeth and the bones long before the sound fully registers. Across the sprawling, dusty airstrips of the Libyan coast, the air is thick with the smell of high-octane aviation fuel and the fine, choking grit of the North African sand. 178 B-24 Liberator bombers are turning their propellers, a mechanical chorus of nearly 300,000 horsepower tearing at the morning silence. This is the 9th Air Force, reinforced by elements of the 8th, assembling for a mission that has no precedent in the history of aerial warfare. The crews, 1,751 men in total, sit sweating in their flight suits, the interior of the unpressurized aluminum fuselages already baking in the Mediterranean sun. They are young men, but their faces are hardened by the realities of a war that has stripped away their youth. They check their instruments, their oxygen masks, and the heavy .50 caliber machine guns that bristle from the nose, waist, top, and tail of their aircraft. They are about to embark on a 2,400-mile round trip into the heart of Hitler's Europe. The target is Ploesti. Deep in Romania, the Ploesti oil fields are the industrial heartbeat of the Third Reich. It is a sprawling complex of 9 major refineries that pumps life into the Wehrmacht's tanks, the Luftwaffe's fighters, and the Kriegsmarine's U-boats. Intelligence estimates suggest that 1/3 of Germany's entire petroleum supply flows through these pipes. To cut this artery is to stall the German war machine in its tracks. The Allied High Command, meeting in Casablanca back in January, had circled this location on the map with a heavy hand. It was not just a target, it was a necessity, but Ploesti is not merely a factory town. It is a fortress. General Alfred Gerstenberg, the Luftwaffe commander in Romania, has spent years turning the area into one of the most heavily defended patches of sky on Earth. He has ringed the refineries with hundreds of anti-aircraft guns, ranging from light rapid-fire cannons to the dreaded 88 heavy flak guns. He has installed smoke generators to blind bombardiers and barrage balloons to shear the wings off low-flying aircraft. He has a network of Wurzburg radar stations and fighter squadrons, German Messerschmitts and Romanian IAR-80s, on constant alert. The Americans know this. They know that a standard high-altitude bombing run, the bread and butter of the Army Air Forces, would be inaccurate and costly. So, Colonel Jacob Smart, the architect of this operation, devised a plan that borders on the suicidal. They will not fly at 25,000 feet. They will not rely on the Norden bombsight's precision from the stratosphere. They are going in on the deck. Operation Tidal Wave calls for the massive 4-engine Liberators to fly at treetop level, under the German radar, and drop their delayed fuse bombs directly into the refinery boilers and cracking plants. It is a tactic designed for surprise, speed, and maximum destruction. It requires the heavy bombers to be flown like fighters, banking around hills and skimming over rooftops, a physical demand that will test the pilot's strength to the breaking point. As the signal flares arc over the Benghazi airfield, the lead aircraft throttle up. The B-24 is a heavy, unforgiving aircraft, often referred to as the flying boxcar. Today they are overloaded, carrying maximum fuel loads in bomb bays stuffed with ordnance. The pilots stand on the brakes, revving the engines until the frames shudder, then release. One by one, the lumbering giants lurch forward, kicking up a blinding sandstorm, the sirocco that swallows the planes behind them. The takeoff is a slow-motion struggle against gravity. Wings claw for lift in the thin, hot air. Wheels leave the ground at the very end of the runway, clearing the scrub brush by inches. One aircraft never makes it, crashing in a ball of fire that serves as a grim grimace of a farewell to the departing armada. But the rest climb slowly, assembling into 5 distinct formations. There are the Liberandos of the 376th Bomb Group, led by the mission commander, Brigadier General Uzel Ent, and Colonel Keith Compton. There are the traveling circus of the 93rd, led by the aggressive and beloved Colonel Addison Baker. The killer, Kane, Colonel John R. Kane leads the Pyramiders of the 98th. The Flying 8 Balls of the 44th are under Colonel Leon Johnson. And finally, the Sky Scorpions of the 389th, led by Colonel Jack Wood, tasked with the specific target of Campana, north of the main complex. They form up and turn north, out over the sparkling blue of the Mediterranean. The mood in the cockpits is tense. Radio silence is absolute. To break it is to alert the German listening posts in Greece and Crete. They are navigating by dead reckoning and visual landmarks, a difficult feat over open water, with hundreds of aircraft trying to maintain tight formation. Trouble finds them early. Over the Ionian Sea, the formation is tight, the drone of engines hypnotic. Suddenly, a B-24 named Wungo Wungo, flying in the lead position of the 376th group, begins to wobble. There is no flak, no enemy fighters. The aircraft simply pitches up, stalls, and then noses over violently. It plummets toward the sea, spinning out of control. Inside the other bombers, crews watch in horror. Wungo Wungo hits the water with a massive splash, disintegrating on impact. There are no parachutes. The B-24, carrying the lead navigator for the entire mission, vanishes beneath the waves. It is a catastrophic loss. The formation has lost its primary pathfinder before even reaching the enemy coast. The psychological blow is heavy. The men know that the margin for error has just evaporated. Despite the loss, the Armada presses on, crossing the coast of Albania and heading into the rugged terrain of the Balkans. Here, the weather turns against them. Towering cumulus clouds build up over the Pindus Mountains, creating a wall of white that blocks their path. The strict formation discipline, essential for the low-level attack plan, begins to fray. The lead groups, the 376th and the 93rd, have engines that are tuned for higher speeds at this altitude. They punch through the clouds and accelerate. Behind them, the 98th and the 44th, flying heavier and slower, are forced to circle or find gaps in the weather. By the time the force emerges on the other side of the mountains, the integrity of the strike force is shattered. The first two groups are far ahead of the trailing three. The simultaneous, overwhelming blow that Colonel Smart had planned, a tidal wave of bombers hitting the target at once, is now devolving into a staggered, piecemeal attack. They drop down from the mountains to the Danube plain, the lush farmland of Romania rushing by beneath their wings. They are flying so low that gunners can see the faces of farmers in the fields, who stop their work to stare up at the thunderous procession of olive-drab giants. The pilots fight the controls, the heavy aircraft buffeting in the thermal turbulence of the low altitude. As they approach the initial point, the specific geographic landmark where they are supposed to turn northeast toward the refineries, the town of Ploesti is the designated pivot point. From there, it is a short, straight run into the kill zone. But the landscape of the Danube plain is deceptive, a patchwork of similar-looking villages, rail lines, and roads. At the front of the Armada in the lead B-24 of the 376th Bomb Group, Colonel Keith Compton and General Uzel Ent look down at the rushing terrain. They see a town. They see a rail line. To their eyes, it matches the briefing maps for Ploesti. But it is not Ploesti. It is Targov East, a town miles short of the correct turning point. A fatal similarity in the rail patterns tricks the command crew. Compton banks the lead formation hard to the right, heading southeast toward Bucharest, away from the oil fields. Confusion ripples through the bomber stream like a shockwave. The pilots behind the lead element watch the maneuver with disbelief. They check their own maps, then the ground, then the lead planes. The geometry is wrong. The heading is wrong. They are flying toward the Romanian capital, leaving the target off their left wing. Colonel Addison Baker, commanding the 93rd Bomb Group immediately behind the leaders, sees the mistake instantly. He is 36 years old, a former mechanic from Ohio, with a reputation for rigid discipline and aggressive flying. He knows that following the lead formation now means abandoning the mission or attacking the city of Bucharest by mistake. He also knows that breaking formation is a cardinal sin in heavy bomber doctrine. It exposes the group to fighter attacks and dilutes the defensive firepower of the massed guns. Baker does not hesitate. He keys his microphone, his voice cutting through the static, ordering his pilots to disregard the leader. He banks his B-24, Hell's Wench, sharply to the left, pulling the entire 93rd Bomb Group away from the 376th. He points the nose of his bomber directly at the black columns of smoke already beginning to rise in the distance. He is leading his men not into a coordinated surprise attack, but into a frontal assault against fully alerted defenses. The element of surprise, the cornerstone of Colonel Smart's plan, is gone. The German radar stations had picked up the formation hours ago. General Alfred Gerstenberg is waiting. As Baker's group drops lower, skimming the cornstalks at 200 miles per hour, the pastoral Romanian countryside transforms into a mechanized slaughterhouse. Haystacks in the fields suddenly collapse, revealing the long, menacing barrels of 88 flak guns. Barn doors slide open to expose quad 20 cannons. A specialized flak train, an armored locomotive pulling flat cars mounted with heavy anti-aircraft artillery, steams along the rail line parallel to the bomber's flight path, tracking them like a hunter leading a duck. The air, previously clear, fills with the terrifying, cracking snap of high-velocity shells. At this altitude, the Germans do not need to set fuses for altitude. They are firing point-blank. Baker leads the 93rd straight into the teeth of the defenses. He is targeting the Columbia Aquila refinery, a dense thicket of cracking towers and storage tanks. The air around Hell's Wench is alive with tracers. A heavy shell strikes the nose of the aircraft, shattering the plexiglass and killing the bombardier. Another shell rips into the right wing, rupturing a fuel tank and setting the number 3 engine ablaze. Inside the cockpit, the heat is instantaneous and intense. Baker and his co-pilot, Major John L. Gerstad, struggle with the yoke. The B-24, heavy with bombs and fuel, wants to roll over and die. Standard procedure dictates that they jettison their bombs and look for a flat patch of field to crash land. But Baker and Gerstad ignore the survival instinct. To dump the bombs now would be to waste the mission. To pull up is impossible. They hold the burning aircraft on course, acting as a beacon for the rest of the group. They fly through a wall of balloon cables, the steel tethers designed to shear wings off. They fly through the smoke screens that Gerstenberg's troops have pumped out to hide the refinery. Hell's Wench is a torch now, trailing a comet's tail of fire that spans the length of the fuselage. Baker holds her steady until they are directly over the target area. The bombs release. Moments later, the right wing finally gives way. The aircraft pitches up violently, climbing to 300 feet in a last, gasping effort to allow the crew to bail out. But there is no time. The B-24 stalls, rolls over on its back and crashes into the edge of the refinery complex. There are no survivors. For their extraordinary leadership and sacrifice, both Baker and Gerstad will be awarded the Medal of Honor. The 93rd Bomb Group, following their fallen leader, ravages the target, but the cost is exorbitant. B-24s are swatting out of the sky by the dozen, cartwheeling into fields or disintegrating in mid-air explosions. While the 93rd is being mauled, the second wave of the attack force arrives. The 98th Bomb Group, the Pyramiders, led by Colonel John Killer Kane, and the 44th Bomb Group, the Flying Eight Balls, under Colonel Leon Johnson, have been lagging behind due to the separation over the mountains. They arrive at Ploesti to find a scene from the apocalypse. The navigational error of the lead group and the subsequent attack by Baker's group have turned the target area into a churning cauldron of fire, smoke, and exploding delayed action bombs dropped by the previous wave. The defenses are not just alerted, they are fully integrated and lethal. The element of surprise has not just been lost, it has been inverted. The Germans know exactly where the bombers are. They know the altitude, and thanks to the chaos of the initial attack, the gunners on the ground have had time to reload and refine their aim. Colonel John Killer Kane, a towering Texan with a reputation for being as hard on his superiors as he is on the enemy, stares through the windscreen of his lead B-24 Hail Columbia. What he sees ahead is a pilot's nightmare. The 93rd Bomb Group, in their desperate and courageous attempt to salvage the mission after the navigational error, has struck targets of opportunity, specifically the Astra Romana refinery, which was Kane's assigned objective. The complex is already burning. Great roiling pillars of black smoke, oily and dense, are billowing up to 500 feet, creating an artificial mountain range of soot and fire. Worse, the 93rd has dropped delayed action bombs, fused to explode anywhere from 1 hour to several days later to hamper repair crews. But in the confusion, some are set for shorter intervals. Kane realizes with a sickening jolt that he must lead the pyramiders of the 98th Bomb Group not only through the German flak, but through the explosions of his own countrymen's ordnance. He does not turn back. Kane throttles forward, his formation tightening up defensively. They drop to 50 feet, literally flying down the streets of the refinery complex. The heat is palpable inside the fuselages, a physical weight that presses against the chest. As they enter, the smoke visibility drops to zero. Pilots are flying on instinct and terror, watching the wingtips of the planes beside them, praying they don't clip a smokestack or a cracking tower hidden in the gloom. Beneath them, the ground erupts. The delayed fuses from the previous wave begin to detonate. B-24s are tossed upward by the concussive force of friendly bombs exploding directly under their bellies. Hail Columbia shudders violently as shrapnel tears through the aluminum skin. Kane loses an engine, the prop feathering into a dead drag, but he wrestles the beast to keep it level. To his right and left, Liberators are taking direct hits from the 88 guns that have been depressed to fire horizontally. These are not anti-aircraft bursts. They are cannon shots, punching massive holes through the bombers as if they were paper targets. One B-24 hit in the bomb bay vaporizes instantly, a flash of orange that is there and then gone, leaving only falling debris. Flying alongside Kane's group is the 44th Bomb Group, the Flying 8-Balls, led by Colonel Leon Johnson. His target, the Columbia Aquila refinery, is also obscured by the smoke and flames of the earlier, uncoordinated attack. Johnson, like Kane, faces a wall of fire. He circles once, looking for an opening in the smoke, a maneuver that exposes his aircraft to withering ground fire for agonizing minutes. His command pilot asks if they should divert to a secondary target. Johnson's reply is curt and etched into history. "It's our target, and we're going to bomb it." He dives the 44th into the inferno. They fly so low that the slipstream from their propellers fans the flames on the rooftops below. They are flying through a tunnel of flak, with tracers arcing over their wings like a bridge. Johnson's aircraft, Susie Q, is riddled with bullets, the control cables fraying, but he holds the line. They drop their loads into the heart of the refinery, adding fresh devastation to the ruin, before pulling up hard to clear the blast walls. For their sheer tenacity in leading their groups into a target area that was already destroyed and fiercely defended, both Colonel Kane and Colonel Johnson will join Baker and Jerstad as recipients of the Medal of Honor. While the main force is being hammered in the cauldron of Ploesti, a separate drama unfolds 18 miles to the north. The 389th Bomb Group, the Sky Scorpions, led by Colonel Jack Wood, has managed to navigate successfully to their specific target, the Stoa Romana refinery at Campina. Unlike the chaos at the main complex, the 389th arrives in good order, their formation intact. But the defenses here are just as alert. The valley leading to Campina is a flak trap. Second Lieutenant Lloyd H. Hughes, a young pilot flying a B-24 in the trailing element of the formation, lines up on the refinery. As he approaches the release point, a stream of automatic weapons fire rakes his aircraft. The bullets puncture the bomb bay tanks and the left wing. Gasoline, highly volatile aviation fuel, begins to spray in a thick mist from the waist of the plane and the wing root. In the cockpit, the smell is overpowering. The fumes fill the flight deck, stinging the eyes of Hughes and his co-pilot. They know the danger. One spark, one tracer round, and the aircraft will become a fireball. Hughes has a choice. He can pull up, jettison his bombs safe in the fields, and try to crash land or bail out. It is the rational choice. It is the survivor's choice. Hughes looks at the target ahead. He looks at his formation. He does not pull up. He holds the leaking bomber steady, flying straight and level at 50 feet to ensure his bombardier has a stable platform. The fuel continues to gush, trailing behind the aircraft like a white streamer. They reach the target. The bombs drop, tumbling perfectly into the refinery works. But as Hughes passes over the target area, the inevitable happens. The muzzle flashes from the enemy guns below, or perhaps the heat from the burning refinery itself, ignites the trailing fuel. The fire races up the stream of gas, catching the B-24. The left wing is instantly engulfed in a sheet of flame. Hughes fights the controls, trying to gain altitude to give his crew a chance to bail out. He manages to drag the burning plane up, away from the refinery, aiming for a dry riverbed, the Prahova, to attempt a crash landing. The aircraft touches down, bouncing once, but the structural integrity is gone. The B-24 cartwheels, the fuel tanks explode, and the wreckage is consumed. Hughes dies in the crash, having successfully completed his mission at the cost of his life. He becomes the fifth man to earn the Medal of Honor on this single day of violence. As the surviving bombers turn south to escape, the battle transitions from a bombing run to a running dogfight. The formation is shattered. The tidal wave has become a scattered retreat of wounded birds trying to outrun hawks. The surviving B-24s, their bomb bays empty but their fuselages riddled with holes, claw for altitude or hug the terrain, desperate to put distance between themselves and the inferno they have created. But the ordeal of Operation Tidal Wave is only half over. They have survived the flak. Now they must survive the fighters. As the formations disintegrate into small pockets of 2 or 3 aircraft, the Luftwaffe and the Royal Romanian Air Force pounce. 57 enemy fighters, Messerschmitt Bf-109s and the agile indigenous IAR-80s, have been vectored to intercept the retreating Americans. The bombers are low, slow, and separated, stripping them of the mutual defensive fire that is the B-24's only salvation. It is a turkey shoot in reverse. The fighters dive from high altitude, building tremendous speed, slashing through the ragged formations with 20 cannons blazing. The American gunners, exhausted from the adrenaline dump of the bombing run, swing their turrets to track the sleek shapes diving out of the sun. The twin .50 caliber machine guns chatter, spitting hot brass onto the floor of the waist sections, but the enemy pilots are skilled and aggressive. They employ a tactic the bomber crews grimly nickname the Q-train, fighters queuing up in a line to take turns making firing passes on a single, crippled Liberator until it goes down. One by one, the stragglers are picked off. A B-24, trailing smoke from a damaged engine, falls behind its wingman. A pair of IAR-80s latch onto its tail. The rear turret fires back, but the fighters weave and close the distance. Cannon shells tear into the stabilizer. The bomber shudders, noses over, and impacts a Romanian wheat field in a blinding flash. There are no chutes. For Colonel John "Killer" Kane and the battered remnants of the 98th Bomb Group, the flight home is a master class in survival engineering. His lead aircraft, Hail Columbia, is a flying wreck. It has lost an engine, the hydraulics are shot, and the fuselage is ventilated by hundreds of shrapnel holes. Inside the waist section, the wind howls through the gaps in the aluminum skin, freezing the sweat on the gunners' faces. The floor is slick with hydraulic fluid and oil. The crew is tending to the wounded, applying tourniquets and morphine syrettes in the deafening roar of the slipstream. Kane wrestles the yoke, his arms aching from hours of manual flight. He checks the fuel gauges. They are critically low. The aggressive maneuvering at low altitude and the drag from the damage have guzzled gas at an alarming rate. He knows they cannot climb back over the Pindus Mountains to return to Libya the way they came. The peaks are too high and Hail Columbia is too heavy. He makes a command decision. They will fly south, threading the valleys to reach the coast and then limp across the Mediterranean. Others are in even worse shape. For some pilots, the realization dawns that Benghazi is mathematically impossible. The damage is too severe. The fuel tanks are leaking. They turn their noses toward the neutral nation of Turkey or the British airfields on Cyprus. It is a bitter choice, internment for the duration of the war, but it is better than a watery grave in the Ionian Sea. 78 American airmen will end their war this way, landing their broken birds on Turkish soil, where they are promptly detained by authorities walking a diplomatic tightrope. The main body of the survivors drags itself across the water. The sun begins to set, casting long, golden shadows across the waves, a serene contrast to the violence of the afternoon. The formation is loose, a ghostly procession of battered giants. Pilots lean on their throttles, willing the engines to keep turning. Navigators, working with charts covered in soot and blood, try to calculate the point of no return. Back at the bases around Benghazi, the ground crews wait. The estimated time of arrival comes and goes. The sun dips below the horizon, and the desert cools. Eyes scan the northern sky, looking for the familiar silhouettes. Finally, in the twilight they appear. Not the tight, disciplined formations that left at dawn, but singles and pairs, struggling to maintain altitude. Red flares arc into the darkening sky, the signal for wounded on board. Ambulances race to the flight line, their engines revving. The landing gear of the returning planes screech against the pierced steel planking of the runway. Some aircraft have no hydraulics for brakes. They coast to a stop at the very end of the strip or ground loop into the sand. Others come in with wheels up, belly landing in a shower of sparks and dust. The hatch of Hail Columbia opens, and Colonel Kane drops to the ground. He is exhausted, his face masked in soot, his uniform stained. He looks around at the scattered remnants of his group. The silence of the desert is heavy. The adrenaline fades, replaced by the crushing weight of the loss. The butcher's bill for Black Sunday is staggering. Of the 178 B-24s that took off that morning, 53 have been lost, shot down over the target, crashed into the sea, or interned in Turkey. Another 55 are severely damaged, many beyond repair. In a single day, the 9th Air Force has effectively lost the combat strength of 2 full bomb groups. The human cost is even more devastating. 310 American airmen are dead or missing. Their bodies lie in the cornfields of Romania, in the wreckage of the refineries, or at the bottom of the Mediterranean. 108 men have been captured, marched away by Romanian troops to become prisoners of war. Among the survivors, the psychological toll is immense. They have flown into the mouth of hell and returned, but they have left their friends behind. In the days following the raid, the surviving crews and the command staff try to make sense of the carnage. The reconnaissance photos taken on August 3rd, 2 days after the attack, tell a complex story. The damage to the refineries is undeniable. The Astra Romana complex, hit by Kane's group, is a ruin of twisted steel and scorched concrete. The Stoa Romana refinery at Campana, struck by the 389th, is out of action. Intelligence officers estimate that 46% of Ploesti's total annual refining capacity has been eliminated in a single blow. On paper, it looks like a victory. The flow of oil to the Wehrmacht has been severed. The planners in Washington and London breathe a sigh of relief. The concept of low-level strategic bombing appears to be vindicated. But the Germans are masters of industrial resilience. General Alfred Gerstenberg, the defender of Ploesti, wastes no time. He mobilizes thousands of laborers, including Russian prisoners of war and local Romanian civilians, to clear the rubble. The refineries at Ploesti were operating below full capacity before the raid, meaning there was slack in the system. Gerstenberg simply reroutes the crude oil from the destroyed cracking towers to the idle ones that survived. He cannibalizes parts from the wrecked sections to repair the damaged ones. Within weeks, the output of refined petroleum products from Ploesti has not only stabilized but begun to climb. The Allies had underestimated the redundancy built into the target. Refineries had been operating at roughly 60% capacity before the raid, leaving a significant margin of idle machinery. General Gerstenberg, displaying the ruthless efficiency that made him such a formidable adversary, simply bypasses the wrecked cracking towers and activates the dormant units. The pipelines are rerouted, the rubble is bulldozed into piles, and the Romanian crude continues to flow, refined into the high-octane aviation fuel that powers the Luftwaffe's defense of the Reich. By the time the smoke fully clears from the Prahova Valley, production is ticking upward, and within months, it will exceed the levels recorded prior to August 1st. The daring, low-level strike, for all its sound and fury, has failed to turn off the tap. The strategic failure, however, does nothing to diminish the human cost paid by the crews who flew the mission. For the men who did not return to Benghazi, the war has taken a sharp and divergent turn. In the neutral territory of Turkey, 78 American airmen find themselves in a bizarre limbo. They had wrestled their crippled liberators over the mountains, bleeding and low on fuel, seeking sanctuary. Instead, they find internment. Under the complex laws of neutrality, the Turkish government is obligated to detain combatants who enter their airspace. These men who survived the flak corridor of Ploesti are now prisoners of circumstance, held in hotels and camps, treated with diplomatic courtesy but denied their freedom. They sit out the war on the sidelines, watching the conflict from a frustrating distance, their war over but their return home indefinitely delayed. For those who went down over Romania, the situation is far more precarious. 108 Americans survived the crashes of their B-24s to be captured by Axis forces. They are pulled from the burning wreckage of planes like Hell's Wench and Jose Carioca, often by the very Romanian soldiers who had been firing at them moments before. The reception is a mix of hostility and curiosity. The Romanians, nominally allied with Germany but culturally distinct, often treat the captured airmen with a surprising degree of respect, viewing them as fellow aviators caught in the gears of a terrible machine. They are marched into captivity, destined for prisoner-of-war camps where they will wait for the Red Army to sweep through the Balkans years later. But for 310 of their comrades, there is no captivity and no return. They lie in the cornfields, in the charred remains of fuselages, and in the quiet cemeteries where the Romanians bury them with full military honors. The cost of Black Sunday is etched into the roster of the 9th Air Force. Nearly 1 in 3 airmen who took off that morning did not come back. The sheer ferocity of the action is recognized at the highest levels of the American military command. In the immediate aftermath, as the debriefing officers sift through the chaotic reports of the survivors, a picture emerges of heroism that defies standard commendation. The United States Army Air Forces awards 5 Medals of Honor for Operation Tidal Wave, the highest number ever presented for a single air action in history. 3 are awarded posthumously. Colonel Addison Baker and his co-pilot, Major John Jerstad, are honored for their refusal to break formation even as their aircraft became a flying torch, sacrificing themselves to lead the 93rd Bomb Group to the target. Second Lieutenant Lloyd Hughes is recognized for his fatal determination to deliver his bombs despite the gasoline streaming from his shattered wing. The 2 living recipients, Colonel Killer Kane and Colonel Leon Johnson, stand as the grim faces of the mission's survival. When the medals are draped around their necks, it is a somber affair. They accept the honors not for themselves, but for the formations they led into the fire. Kane, whose 98th Bomb Group suffered devastating losses, remains haunted by the disintegration of his unit. The Pyramiders had been one of the premier heavy bombardment groups in the theater. After August 1st, they are a skeleton force, their mess halls quiet, rows of bunks standing empty in the desert heat. The psychological impact on the returning crews is profound. They had been briefed that low-level flight would surprise the defenses, that the cornstalks would hide them from radar. Instead, they found the gates of hell waiting wide open. The trust in the tactical planning of headquarters is shaken. The men know now that there is no such thing as a surprise attack on a fortress like Ploesti. The planners in Washington and London are forced to confront a hard reality. Colonel Jacob Smart's concept of a massive, low-level knockout blow was audacious, but the cost-benefit analysis is brutal. The loss of 53 heavy bombers and hundreds of highly trained aircrew is unsustainable. The 8th and 9th Air Forces cannot afford to expend their strength at such a rate for temporary disruptions in enemy production. The doctrine of low-level heavy bombing is quietly shelved. The B-24 Liberator, designed for high-altitude precision work, had been forced to play the role of a ground attack aircraft, a role for which it was never intended. The thin aluminum skin offered no protection against the point-blank range of 88 flak guns and 20 cannon fire. The experiment is over. When the Americans eventually return to Ploesti, the tactics will be radically different. It will not be until April 1944 that the USAAF attempts to strike the refineries again. This time, there will be no surprise, no wave-top flying, and no single do-or-die mission. The bombers will return in massive armadas, flying at 20,000 feet, well above the light flak and balloon cables. And crucially, they will not be alone. They will be escorted by the new long-range P-51 Mustangs and P-38 Lightnings, fighters capable of sweeping the Luftwaffe from the sky before the bombers reach the initial point. The romantic, desperate gallantry of the low-level raid is replaced by the grinding, industrial attrition of high-altitude warfare. The destruction of Ploesti will eventually be achieved, not by a single lightning strike, but by a sledgehammer that pounds the refineries day after day, month after month, until the pipes are twisted beyond repair and the oil ceases to flow. But in the late summer of 1943, as the sun sets over the Libyan desert, the survivors of Tidal Wave are left to mourn. The ground crews who had waited anxiously on the flight lines pack up the personal effects of the missing. Letters to wives and mothers are sorted, footlockers are closed, and the routine of war grinds on. The raid becomes a legend, a story told in hushed tones in officers' clubs and NCO messes across the theater. They talk of the cornstalks stuck in the bomb bay doors of the returning planes, and the thick, oily soot that blackened the fuselages of the few liberators that made it back. These grim souvenirs serve as a testament to the terrifying reality of a mission flown at treetop height, where heavy bombers dared to scrape the earth in a valley of fire. Though the cost was catastrophic, the sheer audacity of Operation Tidal Wave remains etched forever in the annals of aerial warfare. If you would like more war stories from World War II, please like this video and subscribe to our channel.